in a neighborhood where perfection was currency. Scars were unforgivable. The HOA didn't write it in their bylaws, but everyone knew blemishes, flaws, and anything that hinted at an untidy past were quietly exiled through gossip. That's why when Emily Foster moved in, she was doomed before she even unpacked her boxes. She was quiet, almost painfully so. Loose, long-sleeved shirts even in the summer heat. Eyes fixed on the ground when she walked. To the neighbors, she was a mystery wrapped in something they didn't understand. And what people don't understand, they tend to judge. At the first community barbecue, the mystery cracked open. A jagged scar peeked from beneath her collar, crawling toward her jawline. A burn mark caught the sunlight on her wrist. And when she rolled up her sleeve to pour iced tea, they saw it, a stark, unfamiliar tattoo on her inner forearm. Not decorative, not fashionable. Something that felt official. Military, maybe, or criminal, depending on who you asked. By the next morning, the rumor mill was running full speed. Karen Whitmore, the queen of HOA politics, whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear that Emily didn't look like the kind of person who could pass a background check. Her friends laughed. And as days passed, so did the glances, quick, cutting, and full of quiet scorn. Emily ignored them. She mowed her lawn on schedule, paid her dues, and kept to herself. But the stares grew sharper, the laughter bolder, and she had no idea that someone was about to walk into this perfect little neighborhood and see her scars for what they really were. It was the second Saturday of the month when the HOA hosted its quarterly meeting at the community center. Attendance was mandatory for homeowners, and while most dreaded it, there was always a strange buzz in the air, part business, part gossip. Emily sat quietly in the back, trying to blend into the beige walls, while Karen held court at the front, discussing new lawn care fines with her usual smug authority. That's when the double doors opened, and in walked a man who seemed to shift the room's temperature. Broad-shouldered, sun-weathered skin, a limp in his step. His presence alone made people sit up straighter. He was introduced as Mark Lawson, a new homeowner who had just retired from the Army after 22 years of service. Karen wasted no time circling him like a hawk, shaking his hand, smiling too widely. She loved important introductions. Emily, meanwhile, kept her gaze fixed on her notebook, scribbling idly to avoid eye contact. But Mark's eyes wandered over the room, scanning faces, studying people the way someone does when they spent years assessing situations before stepping into them. Then his gaze stopped. It wasn't a casual look. It was sharp, deliberate. He was staring at Emily's arm. Her sleeve had slipped just enough for the edge of her tattoo to show. Something in his expression changed instantly. The confident, stoic look cracked, replaced by something colder, heavier. He didn't move toward her. He didn't say a word. But in that silent moment, every ounce of amusement in his eyes drained away. His jaw clenched. His breathing slowed. And Emily, sensing something, quickly pulled her sleeve back down. For the rest of the meeting, Mark barely heard Karen's chatter or the HOA's talk about trash bin regulations. He kept glancing toward Emily, his mind clearly somewhere else. Somewhere far from this neat, manicured neighborhood. Somewhere she must have been too. And for the first time since she moved in, Emily felt not judged but recognized. Here's Chapter 3, continuing from where we left off. Word spread fast in the neighborhood that the new Army veteran had taken an interest in Emily. The details were wildly exaggerated, as they always were here. Some claimed they'd seen them speaking privately after the meeting. Others insisted that Mark had been asking around about her. The truth was, neither had exchanged a single word. But Mark was watching her, not in the way the others did, with thinly veiled judgment or curiosity, but with the focused, almost haunted attention of someone connecting pieces in his mind. He began showing up in places where Emily happened to be, walking near her unit in the mornings, attending HOA volunteer cleanups he clearly didn't care about, even lingering outside the community center after events ended. The gossip intensified. Karen, feeling her authority over the social hierarchy threatened, fueled it further. You can tell a lot about someone by who they attract, she said during her morning coffee group. If this man's military background has any weight, he's probably seen some things, and if he's drawn to her, well, that should tell you something. But it wasn't attraction that drove Mark closer. It was recognition. One late afternoon, while Emily was trimming the small hedge near her walkway, Mark passed by. For just a second, the edge of her sleeve caught on a branch, pulling up high enough for the tattoo to be fully visible. It was a unit insignia, small, precise, and not something civilians would recognize. But to him, it was unmistakable. He froze mid-step. Memories slammed into him without warning. Dusty air thick with smoke, the sound of helicopters overhead, the metallic taste of fear in the mouth. That insignia belonged to a unit he'd seen before, not in passing, not casually, but in a place and time burned into his mind. That night he couldn't sleep. The more he thought about it, the more impossible it seemed. People didn't just carry that mark unless they'd been there, lived through it, and survived. And survival there was rare. In his gut, Mark knew. Emily's scars weren't the kind you got from bad luck. They were the kind you earned in hell. The following Saturday, the neighborhood park was quiet. Most families were at the farmer's market, and the walking path was nearly empty. Emily was seated at a secluded bench under the shade of a maple tree, a paperback novel resting in her hands. Her sleeves, as always, covered her arms, but the warm breeze kept threatening to shift the fabric. Mark spotted her from across the path. He'd spent the entire week deciding whether to speak to her. Each time he'd seen her, the memory of that tattoo burned a little brighter in his mind. He wasn't sure if she'd welcome the recognition or resent it. People carried their past in different ways. Some locked them away. Others buried them so deep they almost convinced themselves they'd moved on. But his gut told him he needed to know. He approached slowly, his boots crunching the gravel, not wanting to startle her. When she looked up, their eyes met for the first time. It wasn't a fleeting glance. It was a steady, deliberate acknowledgement. There was a flicker of wariness in her expression, as if she already knew why he'd come. Mark didn't sit right away. He stood at the edge of the bench, choosing his words carefully. His voice was low, his tone almost cautious. He mentioned the insignia. Her reaction was immediate. Her fingers tightened around the edges of her book, her posture shifting from relaxed to rigid. For a moment, she didn't answer, but her eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in recognition. He spoke again, naming the unit out loud, and that was the moment the mask she wore every day cracked. She exhaled slowly, setting the book aside, and let her sleeve fall back just far enough to reveal the full tattoo. Mark sat then, his voice quieter still. He didn't ask how she got the scars. He didn't have to. The two of them sat in silence, the weight of unspoken history settling between them. Birds chirped in the distance. The wind rustled the leaves. And yet the park felt like it had been pulled into another time entirely. A time neither of them could forget. From across the street, Karen spotted them together. She froze mid-step, her eyes narrowing as she took in scene. By dinner, the whole neighborhood would be buzzing with fresh rumors, but none of them would come close to the truth. By Monday morning, the neighborhood grapevine was in full bloom. Karen Whitmore, armed with binocular curiosity and the kind of persistence only a bored HOA president could muster, was determined to find out what tied Emily and Mark together. The sight of them on that park bench had been enough to ignite her competitive streak. The same streak that once drove her to organize 3 committees just to ban garden gnomes. She began asking questions. Harmless at first, disguised as polite interest. But when those led nowhere, she became bolder, hinting to anyone who would listen that Emily might be hiding something of national concern. She called in favors from acquaintances in the county office, combed through public records, even drove by Emily's unit twice a day under the pretense of checking for landscaping violations. Meanwhile, Mark tried to keep a low profile, but the attention made it impossible. A few neighbors approached him directly, fishing for details. He offered nothing but vague answers, which only made them more curious. It was during one of Karen's deep internet searches that she stumbled upon something, an old, half-forgotten news article buried in the archives of a local paper in another state. The headline was vague, but the accompanying photo made her pause. It was Emily younger, thinner, and in uniform. The article mentioned a military operation overseas, a tragedy, and survivors being awarded a commendation. The details were scarce, but Karen didn't need all of them. To her, it was enough to confirm that Emily's past was interesting enough to weaponize. She printed the article and brought it to her coffee group like it was a smoking gun. She hinted that the scars were proof of something dark, and the tattoo? Well, she didn't even try to guess what that meant. The more ambiguous her accusations, the more the rumors thrived. But Karen's mistake was underestimating what those scars and that tattoo truly represented. She thought she'd found a way to humiliate Emily, to push her out of the pristine little bubble they called a community. What she didn't know was that the truth she was stirring up would not only expose Emily's past, it would shake the entire neighborhood's sense of safety. And when Mark heard how far Karen had gone, he knew the quiet had to end. The next HOA meeting was supposed to be routine, budget updates, landscaping contracts, and the never-ending debate about trash bin placement. But the moment Emily walked in, she felt the tension. Conversations dipped to whispers. Eyes followed her to her seat. And at the front, Karen sat with a folder on her lap, her lips curled into a self-satisfied smile. When the open discussion portion began, Karen wasted no time. She stood, holding up the printed news article like a trophy. She addressed the room, her voice dripping with false concern, framing her discovery as a matter of transparency. She talked about Emily's mysterious past, the scars, the tattoo, painting them as signs of danger, as if Emily were some lurking threat to their perfect community. Mark, seated a few rows away, rose to his feet before Karen could go further. His voice cut through the murmurs, steady but commanding. He told them exactly what that tattoo meant, how it belonged to a specialized rescue unit deployed in one of the most dangerous combat zones in recent history. He told them how Emily was one of only a handful who survived an ambush that left dozens dead. He described the injuries, the fire, the chaos, and how she pulled 3 wounded soldiers, 2 of them unconscious, out of a burning vehicle while under enemy fire. The room was silent. Emily kept her head down at first, but as Mark spoke, she lifted her gaze. There was no shame in her eyes now, only the steady, unflinching look of someone who had faced worse than judgmental neighbors. She didn't need to confirm anything. Mark's account was more than enough. When he finished, he turned to Karen. His words were sharp but measured, reminding her, and everyone else, that the scars they whispered about were proof of a courage none of them could fathom, that the woman they had laughed at had once been the reason other families got to welcome their loved ones home. Karen didn't respond. She sat down, her folder slipping shut. From that day on, the whisper stopped. Some neighbors offered awkward apologies. Others avoided eye contact altogether. Emily went back to her quiet life, tending her hedges and keeping to herself. But when Mark passed her on the street, they shared a nod, a silent acknowledgement between 2 people who knew the cost of survival. The HOA went back to arguing about lawn heights and mailbox paint, as if nothing had happened. But for those who had heard the truth that night, the image of Emily Foster, scarred, silent, and stronger than they had ever imagined, would stay with them far longer than any neighborhood gossip.